we ready to begin?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so, very first thing, the lost and found. Did anyone leave this here last week? Somebody did.
Might have been me.
Is that your book?
Notebook or folder? Notebook. It's a notebook.
Looks like, yeah.
Okay. That which was lost has been found.
Okay, thanks.
So, announcement, next Wednesday, the 20th, Dr. Gary Bierman will be here meaning over there, and he will be talking about watching for the signs of suicide in teens, teen anxiety and depression. That will only be in the evening. That will be at 7 o'clock in the evening in the activity center. And then we will resume our little get-togethers in January. I'll be talking about the world religions, and I'm almost sure we start on January the 8th. A day that will probably be warmer than this one. One other thing I've been asked to say is that this series is part of really a year-long and something that'll last even longer than that kind of program, campaign, whatever you want to call it, to make us all more aware of the church's call for us to be people of justice. And so we submitted to the diocese a grant application to get some funding to help us to do this. And we were awarded, St. Nicholas Parish was awarded a grant of $400. Now it doesn't sound like much, but they had only about $10,000 to distribute among 36 different applicants. So we were awarded a grant of $400 to help us with this. It might buy peanut M&Ms. I don't know. I don't know what it, but we'll use it for that purpose. So when the Catholic Campaign for Human Development comes up again, just please do keep that in mind. That we were recipients of of that grant.
Excuse me, Mark.
I
Do
think
you
that's it.
anticipate having like one class for one religion? Is that what?
Yes.
Okay.
It's 5 presentations. So my plan right now is Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Judaism, and then I know I want to talk about Zoroastrianism, because when you hear about Zoroastrianism, you'll say,
What?
really? Yeah. It might surprise you how influential Zoroastrianism was in the formation and evolution of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The religions of the Middle East were deeply influenced by Zoroastrianism. So I hope that piqued your interest just a little bit. So today we want to continue talking about the prophetic role of the laity in the church. Last week I kind of laid down the general parameters. So what is a prophet? And Isaiah is an example of an Old Testament prophet. Jesus was a prophet. We are all called to be prophets in the world today because of our baptism. And so today I want to go into a little bit more depth about some of the ways in which each one of us is called to be a prophet. Okay? So, first area in which we are called to be prophetic is in the context of the family. And the quotes I'm taking for this particular section are from Familiaris Consortio, which is a letter, an encyclical letter put out by Pope John Paul II in 1981 that dealt with the family and the role of the family in the world today. Okay? So let's just talk about that a little bit. Number 12, the communion of love between God and people. a fundamental part of the revelation and faith experience of Israel, as we know, finds a meaningful expression in the marriage covenant, which is established between a man and a woman. The operative word there, the word that I want to focus on for a moment, is this one. That marriage is a covenant. We remember what a covenant is, a sacred agreement between God and His people, in which both God and His people make promises. Okay? So, the marriage covenant is a sacred agreement between a man and a woman, and a sacred agreement between a man and a woman and God. And God promises, as He promised to the chosen people, God promises to be present with them, no matter what. God does not promise that everything is going to come up roses, as we know. Okay, life does not work that way. But God does promise that whatever a husband and wife face, God is with them. A husband and wife make a promise to God that they will make God the center of their lives, that their married life will be centered in God, that their primary focus will be on God and not all those other things that, that we're all aware of. Okay? So, and then the husband and wife make promises to each other. They promise to love each other. They promise to love each other unconditionally. They promise to love each other exclusively. And they promise to love each other for life. Okay? So, given the culture and the times in which we live, to see couples who are unconditionally in love, exclusively in love, and in love for the duration of their lives is prophetic. Right? And I'm not saying anything about marriages that just don't work. Sometimes marriages just don't work. But when they do, then they are prophetic. They truly are prophetic because they speak a truth to the culture that sometimes the culture just doesn't even comprehend. Well, wait a minute. Why only this? Why only this woman? So little time, so many. The culture, it sends very different messages. I often think that the message of the culture is in marriage. Well, let's give this a shot and see how it goes, right? Let's just do this and see how long it lasts, right? The Christian marriage covenant is very, very different than that, as you know. Okay. For this reason, the central word of Revelation, God loves His people, is likewise proclaimed through the living and concrete word whereby a man and a woman express their conjugal love. The concrete word of, I promise to be true to you in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health. Okay? Their bond of love becomes the image and the symbol of the covenant which unites God and His people. How profound is that? So the love of a man and woman in marriage is no less than a symbol of the love of God for His people. So that when people see couples that are truly in love this way, they should be able to say to themselves, oh, so that's how God loves us. That's how profound the marriage covenant is. Oh, I see. That. Not only is that like God's love in the world. That is God's love in the world. Make sense? Since the Creator of all things has established the conjugal partnership as the beginning and basis of human society, the family is, quote, the first and vital cell of society. So, the first and vital cell of society. So, first of all, each family is a society unto itself. Husband, wife, kids, husband, wife, kids, grandkids. That is a society. And so, a Christian family shows the larger society what a society should look like and how it should act, how it should treat each of its members with dignity and respect, and how it should love every member of the family. And that same love that parents have for their children and grandchildren and for each other and siblings have for each other. Wait a minute. Oh yeah, siblings have for each other, right? that love is the love that should permeate society as well. Profound, isn't it? The family is a profound and important unit in the world. The family has vital and organic links with society since it is its foundation and nourishes it continually through its role of service to life. It is from the family that citizens come to birth. And it is within the family that they find the first school of the social virtues that are the animating principle of the existence and development of society itself. That says a lot about the family, doesn't it? First, its role of service to life. That is really what the family is about. The family is not just about its own, loving of each other. When family love is most real, it naturally expresses itself and desires to express itself beyond the family and into the world. Okay? Because that's the way true love is. True love is expansive. It goes beyond itself. It goes outside itself into the world. All right? In the family, citizens come to birth. Citizens, persons who both participate in social life, political life, economic life, okay? That the children learn citizenship in the family. Children learn how to be good citizens by the behavior that is modeled by their parents and by the, enough said. The first school of the social virtues. What are the social virtues? Equality, non-discrimination, no prejudice, right? Human rights, every person having their human rights protected and defended and upheld. Patriotism, honesty, transparency. So we all kind of have something to teach to the culture today, I think, don't we? I think we could use a little more honesty, transparency, concern for all. And it is our prophetic role. That's the word I want to focus on. It's our prophetic role to show that, to witness to that. Remember I said that prophets are witnesses, first and foremost, for us to witness to that kind of behavior. Okay. Thus, far from being closed in on itself, the family is by nature and vocation open to other families and to society and undertakes its social role. Okay? So the family does not exist simply for itself. The family exists in order to expand and witness to its love is a witness to the kind of love that should be manifested in society. The social role of the family certainly cannot stop short at procreation and education, even if this constitutes its primary and irreplaceable form of expression. So the Catholic Church has held for a long time that the primary role of married life is for the procreation and education of children. Okay, that's not its only role, but this is how the human race continues. Okay, but John Paul II is saying the social role of the family cannot stop short there. That's not enough. That's not all it is called to do. Families, therefore, either singly or in association, can and should devote themselves to manifold social service activities, especially in favor of the poor, or at any rate for the benefit of all people in situations that cannot be reached by the public authorities' welfare organization. Okay? There's not much that needs to be said about that. Families can and should devote themselves to manifold social service activities, especially in favor of the poor. That is one of the primary ways that the love in families can expand beyond itself. The social contribution of the family has an original character of its own, one that should be given greater recognition and more decisive encouragement, especially as the children grow up, and actually involving all its members as much as possible. So, parents should teach their children that this is part of what it means to be a family. We are a family, therefore we are our brother's keeper. We are a family, therefore we need to reach out beyond our family and help those who are in need. That's part of our job. That's part of our calling. And when families do that, that is profoundly prophetic. Okay? Stop me at any time, all right? Not that I ever have to say that to you guys. Did I go backwards? Yes, I will. The social role of families is called upon to find expression also in the form of political intervention. Families should be the first to take steps to see that the laws and institutions of the state not only do not offend, but support and positively defend the rights and duties of the family. Along these lines, families should grow in awareness of being protagonists of what is known as family politics and assume responsibility for transforming society. Otherwise, families will be the first victims of the evils that they have done no more than note with indifference. That's one of those English translations of a Latin sentence that you really have to... Okay? Otherwise, families will be the first victims of the evils that they have done, that all they have done is treat them with indifference. If we treat these family value issues with indifference, then we will be the victims of them. The Second Vatican Council's appeal to go beyond an individualistic ethic therefore also holds good for the family as such. You know, we know that we are up against an ethic that is highly individualistic. Get what you can get for yourself. pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right? And that manifests itself in all different kinds of ways. John Paul II, the Catholic Church, is saying, no, we have to be more than that. We have to be better than that. And the first way that we do that is through the family. Okay?
Excuse me, Mark, I have to interrupt because that previous slide sort of indicates what the Mennonites and some other groups, when they marry with each other, they take them, they shall call it a family.
Yeah.
But it might be 3 wives and 10 kids. Isn't that wording that I just have heard you read and watch up there said that it could affect that kind of, what do you call it, a commune or a?
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
It doesn't say your wife and your husband and your kids. It just says all children will be, exposed to this and do that.
Yeah, they don't mean that. I mean,
I'm sure it probably
yeah,
does, but it leaves a wide open determination.
Catholic Church's teaching on marriage is monogamous and always has been. And I don't think the Amish or the Mennonites necessarily have multiple spouses. I don't think.
Wow.
I know there are some Mormons, living out in the country in Utah that do that. You know what I mean?
But even that James Jones, the one that says.
Yeah, Koresh.
Yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah. I think that's an aberration of this from this teaching.
Okay, but that wording seems to leave a wide open door.
Yeah. It doesn't mean that,
Yeah.
but I see your point. Okay, now, so what are these family rights that the previous slide spoke about? For this reason, the Church openly and strongly defends the rights of the family against the intolerable usurpations of society and the state. The state meaning governments, in particular national governments, federal government, national. In particular, the Synod Fathers.
Usurpation?
Pardon me?
I don't understand usurpation.
Usurpation is violations. A usurpation is taking away something. If my rights are usurped, they are curtailed or taken away.
Okay.
All right? The Synod Fathers mentioned the following rights of the family. The right to exist and progress as a family. That is to say, the right of every human being, even if he or she is poor, to found a family and to have adequate means to support it. Everyone has a right to family. There are societies that deny that. Hang on for 1 second. This one really shocked me, this next one. The right to exercise its responsibility regarding the transmission of life and to educate children, family life. So I thought, well, why would they bring that up? Not just the Chinese. I looked up some stuff about this country. Yeah, there was that policy. They don't have it anymore, I don't think, where the Chinese had a policy of 1 child, right? So I looked up, when I thought of this, I thought of forced sterilization, which is a practice that happens in certain cultures. It happens in this country. So there was a time, it's not the case anymore, there was a time when there were 32 states which received federal funding to allow forced sterilization. Most often it happened to minorities, Native Americans, people in prison. Between 1909 and 1979, there were 20,000 forced sterilizations in the state of California alone. 1979. Mostly among persons of Asian and Mexican descent. There were 150 prisoners in California who underwent involuntary sterilization between 2006 and 2010. It's not very long ago. They would perform these sterilizations during appendectomy. And
They were sexual offenders, I think.
I don't know. I'm not so sure that they were.
That's abuse.
Yeah, the same thing happened in the 1970s and 80s during appendectomy to Native Americans. And then I found this was really shocking to me. In the 1930s, there was a quote from no less than Adolf Hitler, who said something to the effect, this is before, he began his genocide against Jewish people and all kinds of other people. He said, this state is not the state where, where there is eugenics. It's the United States where that takes place. And he was right. So I am glad that the Pope has, reinforced this teaching about the right of human beings to transmit life. Okay? The right to the intimacy of conjugal and family life. The right to the stability of the bond and of the institution of marriage. The right to believe in and profess one's faith and to propagate it. The right to bring up children in accordance with the family's own traditions and religious and cultural values, with the necessary instruments, means, and institutions. Okay? Those are family rights. If anybody wants any of these, if you want any of these PowerPoints, I'll send it to you. This is not, or you can always look this up. If you Googled Familiaris Consortio, you would get the whole document. Okay, you can get any of these documents online easily. Okay, so specific ways that the family can give prophetic witness. 1, married love. Love that is faithful, exclusive, and unconditional. That is prophetic. That goes against the grain of the culture, right? Child rearing. Child rearing with love, with structure, with stability, with compassion for all, with justice. I think do I have that on that second sheet?
Second sheet.
Okay. Family values, the values of life and human rights, respect for all people, care for the poor, participation in social and political life. Okay? Education. Education meaning the formation of the whole person, body, mind, and soul. So in other words, education in the Christian context, because this is what I do here, and this is what I do at St. Louis University, is education is not just filling our heads with information. Education is about forming ourselves as human beings, as becoming better human beings, as informing our heads, but also informing our hearts and informing our spirits, so that we can be more and more the human being, the person that God created us to be. So that we can achieve and live out our full potential as human beings. Not just being good doctors or scientists or anything else. Doing that, but being better persons. That's, in the Christian context, that's what education is about. Simplicity of life. Indifference and sharing. Okay, let me explain what I mean by indifference. And here I am indebted to the Jesuits who educated me. St. Ignatius Loyola believed in the idea of indifference. And what he meant by that was, let's look at it in terms of money. Okay? So when I am blessed with money, when I am blessed with enough to live and to have a good life, be thankful for it. But when I no longer have it, don't worry about it. If I have it, great. If I don't have it, okay. That's what Jesuit indifference is about. It's about being grateful for what we have, being grateful for God's blessings, whatever they might be, and not being stressed out about what we don't have. So Well, I don't need to go any further than that, but that's what indifference is about. It's not, indifference is not, I don't care. Indifference is an attitude that appreciates God's blessings, but also trusts in God, whether we have or don't have. And sharing. Simplicity of life means sharing what we have. Not hoarding, but sharing with others. That is something I think that gives great witness in the world today. To share what we have. And this parish and many other parishes are outstanding examples of that. That gives witness to the world. Okay. Rejecting consumerism. The consumerism that says, well, now that I have this car, why not that one? Now that I have this house, why not the bigger one? And on and on and on and on and on. And the way to counter that, I believe, and this is based on what I know about this Christian tradition, is valuing ourselves because simply of who we are. Measuring our self-worth not by what we have, but by who we are. Not by our possessions or our degrees or our awards or our esteem in the community, but valuing ourselves simply for who we are as a son or a daughter of God, who, when God made us, made something that is profoundly good. Okay? And hospitality, welcoming the stranger. That is a hugely prophetic and countercultural reality, to welcome the stranger rather than to turn the stranger away. Okay? Yes, sir?
Coming back to indifference.
You are not indifferent to this concept. I take it.
You are correct. If you consider the concept, God created us with certain skills and talents.
Yes.
The expectation you're going to use them
Yes.
to the best of your ability. To the best of your ability. As opposed to indifferent as to whether you perform half.
That's not indifference in the way it's meant here. No, we are not to be indifferent toward the skills and the talents that God has given us. We are called upon to exercise those as best we can. Let me give you a personal example. I have for 30 or more years, 35 years. Oh shoot, it's 40. Let's just say for a long time, I wanted to be a full-time teacher at a university. I believed at a college. I believed that was my calling, that was my passion, okay? But it never happened. It never ever happened. And so, to me, the spirit of indifference says, okay, it didn't happen, so what can I do to act this out or to express this passion in other ways? And over time, I've been blessed with opportunities to do that at Shrine for Lady of the Snows, at my own home parish, here. And so, while it wasn't fulfilled, I mean, it was frustrating. I'm not going to lie, but I learned over time the attitude of indifference. Okay, I can't do that. Thanks be to God, I can do this. It's not, indifference is not, I could find a cure for cancer, but, whatever. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense, David?
So it's more goal focused.
Yeah, it's focused not on what we don't have, but on what we do have, because whatever we have is a blessing.
Don't some orders take vows of indifference?
I think they do. I don't think the Jesuits take a vow of indifference. I don't think.
I had a priest friend explain it. He said, well, they take vows of indifference because, for instance, if you have relationships, you don't want to be possessive of that relationship.
Yeah.
To give space to that person to have other friends.
Yeah, that's a great example. And and that's true even in marriage. Married love is not to be possessive. It's to be freeing. There's an attitude of indifference even within married love. Yeah, no, that's a good example. They take that vow because they may have friends within their own community, but they are also members of a larger community, and they always have to keep that in mind. I think that's true of all Christian love. It's never possessive. It never seeks to own, or control the other. It frees the other. That's a good example of indifference.
I
Thanks.
suggest somebody get a new dictionary.
Well, as you know, David, sometimes words are ambiguous. They have more than one meaning. Right?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, please.
Mark, I just wanted to, on rejecting commercialism, value ourselves and who we are and not by what we have. That's fine and dandy, except that in previous slides and starting the whole subject here, we were talking about fitting into society and welcome society and being part of society.
Yeah.
And society values people for other than what they think they are.
Yeah, okay, good point. It's, when they talked about being in society, it means this. It means being immersed in society,
Okay.
but not adopting necessarily all the values that the society holds up as important. The society we live in holds up individualism as very important, holds up consumerism as very important, right? And so that's our prophetic call, Lee, is to say, yeah, we are in the society, but we have a different way. We want to show a different way of living in society. That I'm a good person simply because I'm here. And every person is a good person simply because we're here. Not because I live in that community, because I live in Ladue and I don't live in Wellston.
What
You see what I'm saying?
What about societies that only welcome you if you have attributes?
Well, yes.
Certificates and degrees and...
Oh, it happens all the time,
Yeah.
doesn't it? Yeah. We're called to witness that there's something more important than that. There's something different than that. There's a different way of being in society. That the poor family is as valuable in the world as the wealthy, educated, family.
You think that's part of our society?
No.
No.
Oh, I don't think our society believes that at all. No, there's a tier system. There's a caste system in our society, I think. We're called to say, no, that's not the way it's supposed to be. That's not what God wants.
He's not good enough to belong to our...
Yeah, exactly. All right, now, next area. I'm glad we spent that much time on the family because that's something that's so close to us and so important. Now, the prophetic role in the economy. This is taken from the document called Economic Justice for All. This document was produced by the United States Catholic Conference of Bishops in 1986. Okay? So here we are. This is the beginning. Brothers and sisters in Christ, we are believers called to follow our Lord Jesus Christ and proclaim His gospel in the midst of a complex and powerful economy. This reality poses both opportunities and responsibilities for Catholics in the United States. Our faith calls us to measure this economy not only by what it produces, but also by how it touches human life and whether it protects or undermines the dignity of the human person. If I didn't show you any of the other slides on this topic, that would be enough. In the Catholic Christian way of thinking about the economy, these are the primary goals of the economy. How it touches human life, how it impacts human beings. The simplest way of saying that is people over profits. People are more important than profits. Profits, not the other profits. And whether it protects or undermines the dignity of the human person. That's it. Everything else, we'll see how it plays out. But this is what economies are for in the Catholic Christian scheme of things. All right. Economic decisions have human consequences and moral content. The economy is not outside the scope of morality. It is not outside the scope of morality. It is well within it. They help or hurt people, right? Economic decisions help or hurt real human beings. Strengthen or weaken family life. Advance or diminish the quality of justice in our land. Just one quick example here, how economic decisions can strengthen or weaken family life. So if there are breadwinners who, because of wages that don't allow them to raise a family, have to work 3 jobs, that is a detriment to their family life. Right?
But it's a reality, though.
It is a reality. It is a reality. And the bishops, the Catholic Church, is calling us to think about that and say, well, wait a minute. Is an economic policy like that, is it detrimental or helpful to family life?
Well, it's detrimental, but what are you going to do about it?
Well, let's keep watching and stay tuned. Every economic decision and institution must be judged in light of whether it protects or undermines the dignity of the human person. The pastoral letter begins with the human person. We believe the person is sacred, the clearest reflection of God among us. They can't say it much more clearly than that, can they? You and I, each one of us in this room, are sacred. We are the clearest reflection of God among us. Human dignity comes from God, not from nationality, race, sex, economic status, or any human accomplishment. I mean, I should probably have that sentence framed. We judge any economic system by what it does for and to people, and how it permits all to participate. This is the standard right here. We judge any economic system by what it does for people, what it does to people, and to what extent it allows people to participate in it. Okay? The economy should serve people, not the other way around. The economy should serve people, not the other way around. Do you see how that's a very prophetic stance on the part of the Catholic Church?
It sounds like socialism.
In some senses, it is, Lee. It is. Because, but it's not a socialism, and I hear this often. It is not a socialism that says everybody has, 2 Chevys and a, 1,500 square foot house, and no, it's not that. But it is a socialism that says every human being is entitled to what he or she needs to flourish, to live out their God-given calling in the world. Everyone has that right Yeah,
So it's about opportunity and making sure opportunities are available to everybody.
that's exactly the
If
word.
people don't have the opportunities, then it's up to the individual to have the initiative, to work, to,
That is correct.
to achieve.
Yeah.
And people will achieve at different levels. It doesn't mean everybody's going to get the same.
Not everybody's going to be a surgeon. Not everybody's going to be a concert pianist. But everyone should. Everyone has the right to fulfill his or her calling in the world. Now, everyone by the same token, as you just said, has the responsibility to live out their calling. It's not a free lunch, but everybody deserves the opportunity. Does that make sense, Lee?
Yeah, I see where you're going. I'm not sure I agree with everything, but.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead, Lee. Feel free to disagree with the Catholic Church. That's no.
Thank you, Father.
I'm just pulling you away. Yeah, John.
Mark, I think that sometimes when we hear this, we can go down the path of socialism, but I think we need to think of the other side too. I mean, to me, it sounded like the founding fathers talking about the economic system they were trying to create in the United States.
That's right. I agree, John.
But it is. I think it goes right down that line.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which is an adaptation of the term life, the phrase life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. The founding fathers had in their head that every individual should have a zone of liberty. And one of the ways of guaranteeing that zone of liberty is by the ownership of property. There's a certain, our home is our castle to a certain extent. Not absolutely, but the founding fathers saw, whether they practiced it or not is another thing, but they saw the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as a protection of individual rights. But our country was also founded as a republic, which means that every citizen, every person in the society has the duty to participate in it and to search for the common good, as they called it, promote the general welfare. Promote the general welfare. Yeah. So we are both of those things. That's why, I was going to say something about libertarianism. No need to. Okay, no need. All people, here it is, all people have a right to participate in the economic life of society. Now we know that there are people whose right to participate in society is either marginalized or it's just not there in reality. One of the primary way that we participate in the economy is by working. It's by working. And how many people just don't have realistic opportunities to work? Basic justice demands that people be assured a minimum level of participation in the economy. It is wrong for a person or group to be excluded unfairly or to be unable to participate or contribute to the economy. It is wrong. For example, people who are both able and willing but cannot get a job are deprived of the participation that is so vital to human development. When persons are deprived of the right to work, they are deprived of their opportunity to be the person God made them to be. And not only do they suffer, but society suffers as well, right? I have thought for years that if it weren't for discrimination and prejudice against all kinds of people, we might have had cures for cancer and all kinds of things. That there's been so much talent just wasted because of prejudice and discrimination and depriving people of the opportunity to fulfill themselves. Okay. 4. It is through employment that most individuals and families meet their material needs, exercise their talents, and have an opportunity to contribute to the larger community. Such participation has special significance in our tradition because we believe that it is a means by which we join in carrying forward God's creative activity. So when a man or woman goes to work, they are participating in the ongoing creativity of God. The work that we do is a participation in God's creative activity. Whether it's talking to a group, whether it's gardening in the backyard, whether it's going to, whatever we might do. Our human activity, our work, is a participation in the creative activity of God. We are co-creators with God. Creation hasn't stopped. It goes on every day. All members of society have a special obligation to the poor and vulnerable. From the scriptures and church teaching, we learn that the justice of a society is tested by the treatment of the poor. That's what we spent 6 sessions here talking about with Isaiah and the minor prophets. God keeps saying, how can you say you love me? How can you say you worship me if you don't treat the least members of your society well? You don't. You don't. Okay? The justice that was the sign of God's covenant with Israel, we studied that, one of God's 4 promises in the covenant, was measured by how the poor and unprotected, the widow, the orphan, and the stranger were treated. That is, according to Christianity, that is the measure of the value of an economic system. The kingdom that Jesus proclaimed in His word and ministry excludes no one. Throughout Israel's history and in early Christianity, the poor are agents of God's transforming power. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, therefore He has anointed me. He has sent me to bring glad tidings to the poor. These are the words of Jesus in the synagogue in Nazareth in the 4th chapter of the Gospel of Luke. This was Jesus' first public utterance. Jesus takes the side of those most in need. In the last judgment, so dramatically described in St. Matthew's Gospel, chapter 25, we are told that we will be judged according to how we respond to the hungry, the thirsty, the naked, the stranger. Whenever you did this for one of my least ones, you did it to me, Jesus says. As followers of Christ, we are challenged to make a fundamental option for the poor, to speak for the voiceless, to defend the defenseless, to assess lifestyles, policies, and social institutions in terms of their impact on the poor. Let's think about one example. When we're considering how to vote on an issue of taxation, that what the church is saying is the first consideration we should have is, how does this impact people? And in particular, how does this impact the poor? Okay? This option for the poor does not mean pitting one group against another, but rather strengthening the whole community by assisting those who are most vulnerable. As Christians, we are called to respond to the needs of all our brothers and sisters, but those with the greatest needs require the greatest response. A specific example of that. In the 60s, 70s, even 80s, there was a tremendous amount of disinvestment in North St. Louis City. The Chevy plant, which hired many people from North St. Louis City. Carter Carburetor. There's others that I'm not thinking of. When they made their decisions about where and whether to relocate, the church is saying one of the primary considerations that they should have is, how does that impact the people in the community? The first consideration is not, how can we make more money? The first consideration should be, how does this decision impact the lives of human beings? That's the standard by which economies are measured. I could go into a lengthy thing about how the Catholic Church since the 1890s has been critical of both capitalism and socialism. It has been critical of both of those systems. But that's for another day.
Let's go back to that same economic time frame. If I take a plant out of St. Louis and I send it to South Georgia, were there not people in South Georgia that needed those jobs?
Yes.
So how do we balance this? Who's where?
That's where the rubber meets the road. So people making economic decisions have to be honest with themselves and honest about what their motives are.
Probably didn't have anything to do with the poor people around them, but in the meantime,
So that, yeah, there are
whatever you do, you
there are
gotta have
competing
somebody.
values.
Yeah.
There are competing values. In the defense of General Motors, I'm not just going to sit here and bash General Motors. That plant was outdated.
but who left it to be outdated?
Yeah, well,
Why was it outdated?
well, that's a good question. Why did they let it get outdated?
Or why was it necessary to move the job somewhere else and build a brand new plant instead of building it here?
Tear it down, but yeah, that's right. Those are the kinds of things that have to be thought of. Why do most grocery chains not locate in poor neighborhoods? They will tell you it's because there's so much theft. But can they substantiate that? I lived in some low-income neighborhoods back in the day, and it costs more to buy a loaf of bread in low-income neighborhoods or to buy a gallon of gas than it does, in better-off neighborhoods. The impact on people.
We have
The impact
definite-
on people.
We have definite just examples right in our immediate area.
Sure.
They close the only grocery store in the whole community.
Yeah.
Making people travel, people that don't have cars and people that.
Yeah, that has an impact on people,
Yeah.
right? That impacts people. All right.
But this was all grandiose for them to say this in the,
In the 80s?
well, the Pope and when they
Yeah.
had the conclave. I mean, these were all great, wonderful things,
Yeah.
but they don't integrate or they don't combine with what's happening today.
Well, and Lee, this is the prophetic nature of these things. They are saying this is the way God intends for the world to run, whether it's there or not. And that's part of our prophetic call, is to say, this particular economic principle, this ain't working for people. This is not working. This is supposed to be for the benefit of people, and it's not. Or it's benefiting these few, it's not benefiting the many. I just think, there is something amiss when there are three families in America that those three families that own more than the bottom 50% of all other Americans. There's just not, I can't speak for God. God knows. But I can't imagine that God is like saying, well, that's okay. You know what I mean? Oh, all right. That's what I'm talking about. So, economic issues that call for a prophetic stance. What can we do? So, the living wage. So, how do we feel about McDonald's paying people $15 an hour? I don't know. What's the impact on people? What is the impact on people? Full employment. Full employment, have every person who has the ability to work and the desire to work should have the opportunity to work. Collective bargaining. Unionization has been something that the Catholic Church has been in favor of for well over 100 years. So that individuals, so that the power or the leverage of the individual is not up against, the corporate powers that be. Okay? That there's strength in numbers.
You look at your unions too, and I know in one of the unions I belong to, I didn't believe what the upper echelons was saying, that this is what we're going to do in this direction.
Yeah.
So what do you do then?
Yeah, it's tough. It's really, really tough. without a specific, it's hard for me to say. But there can come a time, and that's sometimes what unions do. They say, enough is enough. You know, the automobile workers strike that just ended, a couple weeks ago. They gave a lot of concessions when the automobile industry was struggling mightily. Now the automobile industry is doing well, and they want their what they believe is their fair share of the revenue that they generate. It's every one of these things has to be looked at on its own. It's hard to say these are principles rather than you should vote for this or not vote for that. These are principles that should guide our thinking. Sex, age, race discrimination in hiring and in the workplace. Social security. Economic interdependence. In other words, should every country in the world kind of go it on its own and try to bash all the other countries and beat them into submission? Or should we work together as a world economy? And the flaws of capitalism. In a nutshell, because it's already 10:30 and I shoot my mouth off too much, the primary flaw of capitalism in the eyes of the church, ever since the beginning, is not its ability to produce. Capitalism's ability to produce is unparalleled. It is the distribution of the benefits of capitalism that the Catholic Church has criticized ever since 1891. Okay? And the Catholic, and the document there was called Rerum Novarum. It was by Pope Leo XIII. And even back then, don't get me started on this. The prophetic rule regarding property. We just touched on this for a little bit last week. So we'll go into this in a little bit more depth. Now, fair warning, this is the topic I wrote my dissertation on. Fair warning, okay? So, we might be here till 1 o'clock. No, we won't. No, I promise. All right. Populorum Progressio. This is one of the documents that I studied. Populorum Progressio was issued by Pope Paul VI in 1967. Populorum Progressio, on the progress of people. How can people progress in the world? And he was addressing primarily the distance between the developed and developing nations. What sometimes is still called the first world, the second world, the third world nations. Okay. The hungry nations of the world cry out to the peoples blessed with abundance. So here the scope broadens to the whole world. It broadens to all people. And the church, cut to the quick by this cry, asks each and every person to hear his brother's or sister's plea and answer it lovingly. So then the Pope talks about less human conditions and more human conditions. Those conditions which make people's lives better, which ultimately allow them to live out their God-given call in the world. Those are the more human conditions, and the less human conditions. Put it in another word, those conditions that dehumanize people, that make them less than the human beings they were called to be. What are the less than human conditions? The material poverty of those who lack the bare necessities of life. That's less than human. And the moral poverty, the moral poverty of those who are crushed under the weight of their own self-love. That's a form of moral poverty. Those who are so in love with their own selves and their stuff and their reputations and their esteem that they're blind to other people. That's a form of poverty, the Pope says. Oppressive political structures resulting from the abuse of ownership or the improper exercise of power. from the exploitation of the worker or unjust transactions. Now, in the context of the 60s, the political structures that favored the abuse of ownership had to do a lot with those countries, especially Latin American countries, where there might be 2 or 3 families that own a third of the entire country. One of those countries, I'm pretty sure, was Nicaragua. Where were the Somozas? Help me, David. Where was the Somoza family? Was that Nicaragua?
I go Honduras.
Was it? Okay.
That's my opinion.
Okay, so they owned the Somoza family, and one of the Somozas was in charge. The Somoza family owned 1/3 of the country. And what they would do is, they had a lot of land that could be farmed, but they didn't farm it. Where there were people, all kinds of people living in that country who could farm that land, but who were not allowed to because they didn't own it. In that case, a little bit of an aside, the Pope actually said there are times when property like that, when it's that bad, when it's that unjust, when property can be confiscated from people and redistributed. I know that sounds socialist, but that's what they said.
You got a communist.
That's right, yeah. Or communists, but that's what they said. If there is that kind of abuse of ownership, then it's okay to seize it, take that land. Okay.
Let's bring this argument a little closer to home.
Yes, yes.
Within 5 miles of us, we have Holy Trinity, we have this beautiful parish, and we have St. Clair.
Mm-hmm.
We have 3 cathedrals.
Yeah.
And then there's one downtown. What is my own church doing about that same issue?
Yeah. I don't know if, I'm not sure that, a plant like this and St. Clair are necessarily an abuse of ownership, because I don't think that, well, look at this building. This is a beautiful building. You know what I'm saying?
I'm not trying to fault the decisions.
Oh, no.
But look at the juxtaposition.
Yeah.
Because in all of these same communities, we have people who don't have enough to eat.
Yeah. Yeah. And the Catholic Church does have to take a look at itself in that context. Boy, we could, that's another rabbit hole we could climb into. Yeah, we can. But the church has said, I'll put it this way, the church has said that it needs to take a look at its own house,
Yes.
as well as outside of its own house.
And this was written when?
1967.
And it is now what year?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, yes.
I think it's 52 years
Yeah.
ago.
The Pope actually did some symbolic things to try to make it.
But that's all we have done.
Yeah. No, you're right. There needs to be more done. I will not. I don't challenge that at all. There's still a long way to go for both the church and those outside the church, and for us as well.
There's a lot of reaching out that we do.
Well, I do
I know this
understand.
is it too. You think
Yeah.
you could sit back and do nothing, but several groups that I belong to.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a lot of
Because
outreach
individual
in
meeting,
this
I think we have
parish,
to pick up.
and in many parishes. There's a tremendous amount of outreach to people in need. So it's never black and white, is it? There's always
Great.
gray. All right. So now, what are truly human conditions? The rise from poverty to the acquisition of life's necessities. The elimination of social ills. Broadening the horizons of knowledge. Acquiring refinement and culture. Doesn't this almost look like Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Yes.
From there, one can go on to acquire a growing awareness of other people's dignity, a taste for the spirit of poverty, an active interest in the common good, and a desire for peace. Notice what the Pope is saying here. He is saying that the beginning of our fulfillment, our true fulfillment as human beings, starts with having the material things that we need to fulfill ourselves. It doesn't start with prayer and worship. It starts with food and shelter and work. That is the beginning of true human fulfillment. And if those things aren't there, then people will never truly reach their full integral development, is what it's referred to as. Then persons can acknowledge the highest values and God Himself. See how this ascends in a hierarchy? Rise from poverty, social ills, knowledge, culture, dignity, the common good, peace, God. See how it goes up the ladder? Finally, and above all, there is faith. God's gift to persons of goodwill and our loving unity in Christ, who calls all of us to share God's life as sons and daughters of the living God, the Father of all men. This is why the Pope, advocated that the Catholic Church. What's the first thing that the Catholic Church should do when they go into poor countries? Build a church? Give them religion first, right? That's it. No. He's saying no. If they have their material needs taken care of, if they're allowed to participate in society, if there are, if all those things are in place, then they are ready to be able to understand God, the place of God in their life.
That's not what we said the disciples ought to do, though.
Well,
I mean, we're going back to what God's intention was.
I'm not sure that's true, Lee. I mean, I think Jesus said, yes, preach the good news, but He also said, take care of the poor.
Feed my sheep.
Feed my lambs and feed my sheep.
Okay, but I mean,
This
all
is the
these
strange-
other conditions that you're talking about before that has a lot more to do than just feeding them and showing them God's way.
That's only the beginning. Making sure that people have what they need is just the bare minimum. But the Pope is saying without that bare minimum, then the rest of it won't happen.
Well, and the apostles were going out to all the different communities and towns of people who were non-believers. They weren't necessarily poor. They might have been tax collectors, rich people, anybody. That's who they were sent out to people who didn't know God.
And it's true, too, that in the early church, there was a lot of attention paid to the poor persons in their community. In fact, Paul, in the letter to the Corinthians, is quite critical of those Corinthians who are doing the class thing where, the wealthy people can come in the house and eat their food for the agape meal, but the lower classes have to stay outside and they can eat their own food. Paul says you can't do that. All are one in Christ.
I thought they would heal the sick, teach God's, believe in God, that.
Oh yeah. But
I don't think it was talking about the economy of that region.
the two go hand in hand. I think Jesus' message is the two go hand in hand. That the gospel, preaching the gospel, is witnessed by those actions of taking care of the poor. That's how you show it. That's how you show your faith in action. Okay. From the first letter of John, he who has the goods of this world and sees his brother in need and closes his heart to him, how does the love of God abide in him? Everyone knows that the fathers of the church laid down the duty of the rich toward the poor in no uncertain terms. As St. Ambrose put it, you are not making a gift of what is yours to the poor man, but you are giving him back what is his. Now that's a radical idea of property, isn't it? That's radical. You have been appropriating things that are meant to be for the common use of everyone. The earth belongs to everyone, not to the rich. These words indicate that the right to private property is not absolute and unconditional. Okay, now, the 30-second version of my doctoral dissertation. Here we go. 30 seconds. So, point one. The world belongs to God. The world does not belong to us. The world belongs to God. God has, point two, God has given us the world. He has given the world to us as a gift. Point three, because the world is a gift to us, it is not to be hoarded, it is to be shared. Point four, God has given the gift of the world to every human being. Therefore, every human being has the right to use the good things of this earth. To have and to use. Point five. Anything that we own is not ours absolutely. 2 points about that. First, we are merely caretakers. We are temporary stewards of what we have. And we should take good care of what we have. Second point about that, our right to own is conditional. It's conditioned by, it's not absolute. It is conditioned by the needs of those who don't have what they need. So how much should we or can we own? We have a right, remember it's not an absolute right but a conditional right, to own what we need to live, to flourish, to have a good life, and to fulfill our calling on this earth. And whatever is over and above that is considered superfluous and should be given away. Now the obvious question is, well, how much is enough? I don't know, and neither does the Pope. They don't make any judgments about that. They say it's up to each and every individual, each and every family to make that determination for themselves. I live alone in a 3,000 square foot house. You know, me and 2 cats. You know, so do I have more than what I need? Probably. But, you know, my kids and grandkids still value that house for our gatherings for Thanksgiving and holidays, Christmas, and all that kind of thing. So I'm not ready yet. Someday I will. Someday I'll have to. When I can't go up the 20 steps it takes to get to the second floor, someday I will. You know, and I don't know when that day is. But that's a decision that I have to make. You know, some of us are retired. How much do we need in the bank to retire? It is, who knows? Who knows? When we know that probably 50% of all the healthcare expenses we will ever incur in our lives will take place in the last 100 days of our lives. Who knows? Each one of us has to make that decision. We have to balance what we own against the needs of those who don't have what they need. That's more than 30 seconds, but that's what I wrote. That's what I
just read in this morning's morning Arts, the Arts night, and it showed Paradise, California.
Yeah.
That there were 26,000 people there last year. I think it was last year.
Mm-hmm.
And there are now 4,000 people.
Yeah.
Because everything else is burnt.
It's gone. It's gone.
Everything they had just went.
Yes.
You know.
Gone.
Yeah, so when we talk about, I gave it to you and I can take it back, Mother Nature sure proved that in a heck of a hurry.
Absolutely true. We just don't know.
So,
We just don't know.
I was just thinking about that as you were talking, though, that
Yeah.
he owns the earth, he gave it to us,
Yeah.
we need to take care of it, but if you have more than you need, you should get some back.
You're anticipating what I'm going to say about the environment.
They need to rename the town also.
Yeah, Paradise, yeah.
Road to bridge.
How about Paradise Lost?
There you go.
Thank you. Thank you. No one may appropriate surplus goods solely for his own private use when others lack the bare necessities of life. In short, as the fathers of the church and other eminent theologians tell us, the right of private property may never be exercised to the detriment of the common good. The rights of all, excuse me, the rights of all take precedence over my right to own whatever I want. When private gain and basic community needs conflict with one another, it is for the public authorities to seek a solution to these questions with the active involvement of individual citizens and social groups. Public authorities are elected officials. But then, how many of our elected officials
Yeah.
have this mindset? All right, for the sake of time, it's also saying that that this slide says that the wealth of the wealthy nations should be placed at the disposal of the poorer nations. In other words, that's another way of reinforcing that thing that we are one human family. We are one human family. So the people who live in Nigeria or the Philippines or Guatemala are as much brothers and sisters as, you know, the people who live next door to us. Okay? We are one human family. Yeah, there it is. We must repeat that the superfluous goods of wealthier nations ought to be placed at the disposal of poorer nations. Now, the prophetic role in political life. All right, this slide, I'm going to go a little faster. This slide talks about human interdependence. We, as a world community, depend upon one another. Okay, so we shouldn't be fighting each other. We should be working together with each other. Now, there's huge challenges when it comes to that, of course. But, and we'll talk about the methods, the means by which Christians should approach peace and peacemaking. Here, I got an idea.
You know, wouldn't it be better to extend this than try to pack everything like this into this short time? That's my opinion.
We just are out of time. But I would be more than happy to send anyone these slides if you want them. I'll.
Because it's too much and you go so fast that you tend to lose.
Yeah,
I do anyway.
yeah. I have said most of the main points that I want to make, I've been able to make, and but you're right. I always prepare more than I can. I bite off more than I can chew. Right. So here are some political issues that call for a prophetic response, and the key behind our prophetic role in political life doesn't have anything to do with party or party affiliation or ideology. It has to do with the morality behind these issues. Okay? Participation in political life is about morality. So, here is the right to participate in political life. There are people who claim that there are certain states that are trying to suppress voting. Okay, in other words, they're trying to suppress the right of all people to participate in political life through their exercise of the vote. Not just the right to participate, but the duty that we have to participate. We cannot be apathetic. So voting, immigration, taxation, you know all these topics already. Education, healthcare, climate, life issues like abortion and euthanasia and the death penalty and gun violence, and religious liberty. All of these things are issues that we have to think about, and think about in terms of morality, and in terms of the common good, and in terms of the dignity of human beings.
Any one of those subject breakout areas, subcontract or whatever, is worthy of.
Yeah, we can go on and on and on.
I mean, yeah.
And any one of these that you want me to go on and on about, God knows I can, and I do. So I can, I can make this relatively brief. This is in Laudato Si. Pope Francis's encyclical of 2015 about our care for the environment. I can reduce this to maybe 2, 3, maybe 4 points. What's the basis behind this? It's the same as when we were talking about the economy. The world has been given to us by God as a gift.
Amen.
It's a gift from God. And because it's a gift from God, it's our calling to take care of it. And the second point, Francis says that the biblical injunction to subdue the earth, to dominate and subdue the earth, has been misunderstood, especially in the last couple of 100 years during the Industrial Revolution. It was understood. And I have read about this, where part of the rationale for, strip mining and oil and, digging up oil out of the ground and cutting down forests right and left and whatever is because God said that's what we should do. We should subdue the earth. Francis is saying that's a misunderstanding of that word subdue. That to subdue the earth means to take care of it, to protect it as God's gift. That's point number 2.
What does subdue mean? Subdue does not mean to take care of.
Well, you have to look not at the English word, but you have to look at the Hebrew word behind it. Okay?
You got me there.
Okay. And, yes, that our lack of care for our physical earth and for the environment impacts poor people more than anybody else. Our lack of concern for our earth is actually creating situations where there are refugees. There is now a classification of refugees called climate refugees. People who have to leave their country because they can't live where they grew up, because the land that they live on is no longer sustainable. Okay? So that's the call. I mean, and the Pope says, Francis says, that there is a global climate crisis. He does not say it's up for debate. He says there is a global climate crisis, period, end of sentence, and that we, human beings, are primarily responsible for it. Okay? It's our fault. It's not the normal, ebbs and flows of climate over the centuries and whatever. No, it's us. And so it's up to us to do something about it before we lose it. The earth would survive us. If we went away, the earth would continue to exist. But I think it would be better if we were here. I think if the human race were here. So that, really in a nutshell, is where Francis is going.
Current situation doesn't validate that.
What do you mean?
That the earth would be better if we
weren't here?
If we weren't here,
Yeah.
the earth would survive, as you said.
It would survive.
And if it's going to be better if we're here, we got to stop polluting.
That's exactly right. We have to stop now.
Might even be too late.
Today. It might be too late. You're right. Both everyday experience and scientific research show that the greatest effects of all attacks on the environment are suffered by the poorest. This, I think, is one of the most important contributions of Laudato Si to this whole climate discussion. When we're talking about resources, when we're talking about protecting resources, that also means we need to protect the human resources of this earth, and that includes poor people. We're squandering all kinds of resources, including human resources. Poor people. That, to me, is one of the greatest linkages that Francis brings to the whole climate crisis discussion. And finally, the prophetic role on war and peace. I can probably conclude with this one. And I talked about this last week. This is from Gaudium et Spes, from the Second Vatican Council, the Pastoral Constitution on the Church in the Modern World. Peace is not merely the absence of war, nor can it be reduced solely to the maintenance of a balance of power between enemies. That's pretty much how we normally think of peace, right?
Yep.
We're not at war, and there's a balance of power. That's good enough. Church says that's not good enough. Nor is it brought about by dictatorship. Instead, it is rightly and appropriately called an enterprise of justice. What does that mean? That means there is true peace when the common good is achieved, when every person on this earth has what he or she needs in order to truly fulfill himself or herself and to live out their God-given calling. That's when there's peace. So peace is never an achievement. Peace is an ongoing challenge at all times. Peace has to be won and won again and won again and won again and again. Peace results from that order structured into human society by its divine founder. That's a fancy word of referring to what is called in Catholic theology the natural law. That the natural law says that when God created the earth, there was a certain order or way, there was a certain way that God intended for it to function. And peace will return to earth when we restore that way, that order that God created and intended for the world from the very beginning. So it's not just, well, we're not killing each other, we're not dropping bombs on each other's heads. It's more than that. It is, as this says, an enterprise of justice, where everyone's rights are recognized, where everyone's rights are fulfilled and protected, where everyone lives up to their responsibilities to contribute. That's peace.
Then he turned around and gave us free will.
Yes, which is the only way you can really have peace. It's the only way there can ever really be love. If love is forced, it ain't love. It's something else. If peace is forced, it's not peace. It's coercion. The common good of humanity finds its ultimate meaning in the eternal law. That's the natural law. But since the concrete demands of this common good are constantly changing as time goes on, as we know, peace is never attained once and for all, but must be built up ceaselessly. Moreover, since the human will is unsteady and wounded by sin, as Lee just said, the achievement of peace requires a constant mastering of passions and the vigilance of lawful authority. So there is a place for law. But this is not enough. This peace on earth cannot be obtained unless personal well-being is safeguarded and persons freely and trustingly share with one another the riches of their inner spirits and their talents. A firm determination to respect other people and peoples and their dignity, as well as the studied practice of brotherhood, are absolutely necessary for the establishment of peace. Hence, peace is likewise the fruit of love, which goes beyond what justice can provide. Dang. Any human society, if it is to be well-ordered and productive, must lay down as a foundation this principle, namely that every human being is a person. That is, his or her nature is endowed with intelligence and free will. Indeed, precisely because he or she is a person, he or she, they have rights and obligations flowing directly and simultaneously from their very nature. If we look upon the dignity of the human person in the light of divinely revealed truth, God's divinely revealed truth, we cannot help but esteem it far more highly. For we are redeemed by the blood of Jesus Christ. They are by grace the children and friends of God and heirs of eternal glory. That's every person. So that's that, and this is my last little slide here. So after hearing all this, the question may have arisen, and I hope it has. Well, what do we do? What do we do about it? And that's the third handout. So the third handout lists different actions that you as individuals or we as a group can undertake in order to promote justice and peace. So I just invite you to take that home, take a look at it, and I hope it leads to further discussion and further questions and suggestions for things that we might be able to do. And that, as they say, is that. Any other questions or any other?
When we get together again?
We're getting together again in January the 8th, I believe it is, Ken. But I'll send out the electronic flyer.
Okay.
I know that's a lot. Thank you for listening. Thank you for coming out in the cold.